Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and welcome to the final video that I am doing on DVG's Valkyrie. I've got to say, I've had a lot of fun with this game over the past so many days. It really is a lot of fun to play. I haven't been able to show you guys everything though, because a lot of it does have to do with the campaign segment of the game. So that's what I've set up for you here. We're going to go over this, the basics of it. I'm not going to get horribly in detail over it, but I want you to understand the basic concept of how a campaign game will work. And then we'll go over a few final thoughts about the game itself. Now, this big sheet that I have laid out in front of you is a campaign map, okay? So just understand that. And I've set up a gist of what the campaign could look like. This isn't exactly to specs of what's listed down here, but just an example so you guys can understand the premise of what I'm talking about, okay? So one of the first things that you'll look at is up here in the top left. It'll tell you the name of the campaign, and it'll give you down your side and your supplies, how many battle groups that you're going to have, which can be adjusted. Like this one says 3 Valkyrie battle groups, and that can be adjusted if you have pilots that have plus to their groups. This is where that thing that I was talking about earlier when I first mentioned pilots before we got started in the playthrough, that some of their stats came into play on the campaign. So things like groups and forces will come into play here, where they can increase the amount of assets that you can have on the board or in different groups, things like that. When I say group, these down here are a good example of that. So groups 1, 2, and 3 Valkyrie groups. And this shows you, okay, well, this has this Valkyrie, and then these units, this Valkyrie, these units, and this Valkyrie, these units. And then you've got little counters that you'll use to signify what your units are, but also the enemy units. And that's what I've got shown on the board. We'll get onto those here in just a sec. And it tells you a gist of what the combat is, what's going on, and then the victory conditions that you need to have, which are generally holding so many resource installations or bases or garrisons or whatever they are on the map. Over here, real simple to understand. Campaign turn track, and then the terrain generator is listed right here, and then you have a little campaign turn counter that you'll just move across as you go through your turns. Now right here is listed down the starting AI battle groups, and I've got those kind of laid out here for you so you can see. And you'll see it lists down certain forces in parentheses, like power plant T80 times 2, like up here at the top. So that's going to be one stack of counters. So you know when you encounter something, like say you go into Valkyrie here, which I think is right here. All right, say battle group 1 entered Valkyrie. You would not be fighting all of the forces that are here. You would fight one of these stacks, one of these groups at a time. So you don't have to amass enough forces to be able to defeat everything in an area. You'll conduct your combat against, a stack. And then if there's multiples left, it'll go back and forth until one side will own the area. So you can see there's multiple different types of battle groups that are listed down, and a battle group can have either a Valkyrie leading it or an installation leading it. And when I say installation, I mean something like a garrison. We'll go over this sheet here in just a little bit, but just understand garrisons, factories, power plants, stuff like that. All of that can be an installation leading a battle group or controlling a battle group. So it lists down garrison, BTRs, and it'll tell you how many. And the counters list down, they'll say, like you see this little BTR counter here, times 4. So you know there's 4 of those. And then there's some of those GAs, which are their versions of Humvees. Now, the AI can have units on the board that don't have a Valkyrie or a installation with them. The player character can't, though. So you have to have either a Valkyrie or one of your installations controlling each one of your battle groups. So you can see spread all across the map are a whole bunch of different enemy battle groups that are spread out between enemy Valkyries and oil refineries and bases and all the T80s and artillery cannons, everything that they have. They'll all be stacked together so you know which is in each one of those battle groups. And then now the installations don't move. The installations are going to stay in whatever area they're in. So this garrison, this will stay here. This power plant will stay here. But the Valkyrie itself could move around the map. And there's a a role that'll determine what they're going to do, and that's going to be the same for any of their mobile type forces. So before we get too much more into that, one thing I meant to mention a second ago, keep in mind prototype. What you get is going to look a little different than this because, like I said, they've already made some changes to this. A few of those have to do with the openings. That's what these triangles here are, and you can pay resources to create more openings to where your forces can come in from different directions. But some of the things that they've added to this is instead of just ground openings, they've actually added in a amphibious assault where forces can land in, and then there's a specific sequence. So basically you say, hey, I have naval amphibious landing that's going to be happening here. Well, your forces actually don't arrive that turn. They're going to arrive the following turn. But any enemy forces that are in that location, that amount of your forces, so say there's 80 points of enemy forces in that location, you automatically lose 80 points of your stuff that is doing the naval landing to signify the fighting, right? So you want to try to have that area clear before your naval forces land. Something else that they've actually looked into adding in is an airdrop. That's why I've actually got that written in up here. And it's a airdrop that can be done, but it's only for a certain amount of forces. You can't just land 500 points worth of forces right here in the middle. I think right now the estimate's about 100 of points that you'll be able to airlift in. You'll pay points, supplies to be able to bring them in, and then you can drop them anywhere onto the map. So you could get behind the enemies or scoot into an area where they have an installation that's undefended and take that. Because one of the neat things about the campaign is you see things like this power plant over here, the oil refinery, another power plant over here, factory down over here, that they have point values. And by your controlling those installations, that gives you bonus supplies that come into your holdings during your turn. Because you can see player strategic, for the strategic play, it starts with the player, scouts move, non-scouts move, resolve the battles. That's where anytime your forces and their forces are together. And then when you're in your player resupply phase, you're going to get whatever the amount of your basic resupply is, plus supplies for each player installation. So there could be potentially installations that you start with or installations that you capture from the enemy, which will increase your resources. And during this player resupply phase is times that you can spend points to upgrade Valkyrie pilots, to buy new pilots, to buy new equipment, to buy new Valkyries, so you can keep adding to your forces. And that's where the openings come into play and the naval landings and all that stuff, as you're bringing in more forces to it and gaining the control of their areas, so you're able to use those resources to help aid you. Now, real quick, one thing just to address it. I skipped over real quick with the scouts move, the non-scouts move, and that just has to do with scouts are a scout formation, so something led by like a Valkyrie per se, that it has at least 3 movement die, and all the units located with it have at least 3 movement die. So this battle group here could be a scout group because they all have at least 3 movement die for them. And they, during the scout move, can move up to 2 areas. Whereas when you're doing your non-scouts move, they can only move to adjacent areas. Now, there is a special rule that has to do with the fact that your non-scouts can get an extra area of movement as long as they meet certain conditions, like moving in the same direction that a scouting force has already moved. So if they're moving towards one of their scout forces, they can get an extra bit of movement. So it's basically kind of like an RTS. You know, you'll have your forces and they're moving around the board, and they'll have their forces, and as they're moving around the board, when the forces meet in the same area, that's when you'll come back down to the tactical map. You'll generate some terrain. You'll have your battle forces can potentially route, and you do need to keep track of what area your forces entered or their forces entered from, because if they route, it will come into it to where what direction you're retreating from or they're retreating from. But I know one of the things you're thinking is one of the things I was thinking. Okay, well, yeah, I'll just kind of hang back and build up my forces a little bit. You know, just play easy, play defensive, and wait to build up a lot, and then I'll try to gun them down. But they've actually got a neat little bit for that, and that's actually called the AI operations down here. And I like this. It's once per the strategic turn, so once per campaign turn, the AI is going to be doing similar to what the player does. So they're going to move, they're going to resolve their battles, but then they have AI operations, and they get to roll on this chart once per 100 supplies or fraction thereof of AI installation supplies. So the supplies that they have on the board, they get bonuses from, and that can gain them extra stuff. So just like the player is able to gain resources, gains a basic amount, and can gain control of installations to gain extra supplies and units on the board, the AI gets that as well. And you can see here, like for example, add T80 times 2 to a mobile AI battle group, cancel 10 supplies, add a, I'm going to mispronounce that, Dominavoy to an AI installation, cancel 20 supplies, add to an AI battle group, and then you'd roll. It would either be T80s or BDRs or the gas, the artillery, anything. They can even separate one of their battle groups and create 2 battle groups from it that can continue to grow. So the AI effectively is going to be doing the same thing that you're doing in the campaign. You're moving your forces around. You're trying to gain control of territory. You're trying to gain control of installations, so you'll have more resources to spend on units. Well, the AI is going to be doing the same thing. They're going to try to keep installations, and then they're going to keep reinforcing their units that are on the board. Now, you can't just reinforce anywhere. There is a range that comes into play, and I don't know if these are set in stone just yet. Like you see here, supplies 0, so it starts open, but the range is only 1, so it's adjacent. But this one up here, the range is 2. Like I said, don't take anything that you see as final here, because this is going to be changing with potential airdrops or naval drops that'll happen. Just understand this is where your troops will come in, and you can pay supplies to open in new areas for your troops to come in, and they can come in by sea or air or ground. Now, just to show you really quickly, when it comes to the installations, they operate very similar to how you've seen how the Valkyries operate when it comes to, they have armor, they have core locations, they can be damaged in multiple different areas. They can even have weapons of their own, a little small missile rack on your garrison, a heavy cannon, close range attack. So, they're troops that are there fighting off. They have intel dice, miscellaneous, other attack dice, and these areas can be destroyed, take damage, and then lose power. And you see the same system that it operates with the Valkyries, with them operating off a power system, is going to be the same way when it comes to installations. So like you see here, garrison, and then there's a base, which is a little bit bigger, more areas to destroy. Ooh, even 3 armor. Ooh, that's nice. Factory, this is one of the areas where you can gain supplies. You see actually the supplies are listed down on the place because it has multiple targeting areas. The power plant that I mentioned, and then even an oil refinery. Now some of these like a garrison or a base, for example, can have artillery that can come into play starting on the 6th turn, inflict a 4-die bombardment attack on the highest victory point player. So make sure you pay attention. Any special rules are going to be located down here into the bottom right. But you can have terrain that's on the board that's actually part of the fight. Areas that you can shoot up, take control of, blow pieces off of it. So this is a neat addition. I like how they had the installations. And you can have a fight where you have your group of a Valkyrie with some units moving in against a garrison, an enemy garrison that has a few tanks defending it, and you're trying to take out the tanks and the enemy garrison, or you're trying to take control of the garrison. Just neat way that they have this set up. It really does feel like an RTS to me in how this is all going to play out. Okay, so that's the basics of how a campaign is going to go. Trust me, that's not all the rules and all the specifics of it, but it gives you the gist of how the campaign system is going to work. You're going to be operating off your basic strategic map, and you'll be floating back and forth between the tactical map and the strategic as your forces continue to battle back and forth, and you'll keep track of what you have versus what they have. Just a neat system. This is something that you could play over a period of days or weeks as you run the campaign out and play each one of these little individual battles. It's not going to be like, Total War, where you can just hit, automate attack. You'll have to actually get down on the board and roll the dice, but still a neat system. I like it. Okay, so when it comes to the general thoughts about the entire game as a whole, I've had some people asking me about it, privately. I've gotten messages a few times about it, like, is it like Warfighter? Is it like the Leaders series? Is it like those? What should we expect with it? And this really does feel like a new game system. Now, it's got the DVG feel to it, okay? So if I did not know that they made this game, sorry, loud truck was driving by. If I did not know they made this game and you just set me down and let me play it, and I played out through a little bit of it, and then they asked me, who do you think published this? I would probably guess DVG, because it does have their feel when it comes to it. It's almost like the Leader series meets MechWarrior, But it is a completely different system. It's all operating independently of any of the other games. They have worked on this, I know, for a long time, and they're trying their damnedest to make sure they perfect it as much as possible. For me, the big thing that stood out, of course, is the mechs, because the mechs are what make this game, and this really does show where they put a lot of love into it. I'm sure a lot of play testing, determining the right amount of armor for the different locations, the right amount of hit locations, because each one of the mechs is going to be different. Some mechs are going to be faster, some are going to have more armor, some are going to have more weapons. Each one of the different nations have different feels. Like the Russians do seem to be bigger, they have more hit locations, they have hard-hitting weapons and stuff like that, but they're not as fast. They're slow, they're lumbering. The Americans are fast, quick, have high-tech weapons. Neat system that they've designed for it. So in none of their other games have I seen it to where you've had installations and power and weapon systems you got to keep track of and all the other stuff. Like in all the other Leader games, once a unit activated, it was done, right? It's activated for this turn. And for your small units, that generally rings true. The AI, might cheat that here or there, but generally that rings true. This, though, you have to maintain your power settings when it comes to your Valkyries, because you can put your power to multiple different things. Like you saw me do when I was doing the playthrough of this thing. Knock off all that damage because they destroyed my Valkyrie. When I was applying the power to this guy, I could apply a couple of power cubes to a weapon, and because I was saving power for later to use a different weapon, because I knew I was getting bonuses from the flanks as it was, so I didn't have to pump as much power into like my laser, for example, because I knew I was getting that bonus, or I knew I was going to use an intel cube so I could float that. That, to me, is one of the big things that stands out, is the power system for the units, the Valkyries back and forth. And the thing of it is just like any solitaire game, the AI has to get a little bit of a boost, because when you're playing against, the game itself, the AI, any card-based system can't outthink a person, so they do have to be able to have a little advantage over you to effectively make the game fair. And I felt for the most part it was, like I said, they're still tweaking these cards when it comes to the stats are on them. They're, working on it back and forth, testing the numbers, and they were getting back to me about, hey, we made this little change, trying to get it down as close as possible. But I think for the most part, they've done a good job with it, because I had to decide, do I run in with my Valkyrie? Do I apply power to this? Do I apply power to that? And AI did have its ability to apply power in ways that I didn't, and I had to make that consideration when I was making my own choices. Like, well, the AI could do this. It could hit me with bombardment. Do I want to move up? Do I want to move this unit and make it the closest? Or do I want to make that one the closest as a sacrifice so they don't shoot at my more valuable targets? Do I hold back a die so I can keep my support units camouflaged so the AI is not going to target them? it's little things like that that just stand out to me when it came to the game, especially with the Valkyries. They just are the focus. They feel like the focus. They look like the focus, and they can be easily painted to just stand out on the table. So I think that they've done what they set out to do, which was to develop a good mech game. Now, I think I've mentioned this in my videos before, but one of the ways that I try to estimate whether a game is good, right? Whether I think it's worthy of the cost is, will I get my money's worth out of this game? And the way I estimate that is roughly $1 an hour, right? I know that sounds kind of odd, but hear me out. If I spend $50 on a game, just round number, I want to be able to get at least 50 hours worth of play out of the game before I would even potentially get bored and just want to shelf it and not play it. So when it comes to this game, I'm not sure what their price is. I think it's somewhere in like 70, 80. I'm not sure. So let's estimate 70 to 100. All right, somewhere in that range. Could we get 70 to 100 hours out of this game and still be having fun with it? Yeah, I would absolutely give it that. Straight off the bat, I don't think that's going to be any problem. Even if you were just playing the tactical game itself, you should be able to hit that easily. But when you throw in the campaign system that you could easily play over the course of a week, I mean, if you spent, those of us who have young kids will understand this, the few hours that you have after they've gone to bed, playing in the evening and working out your strategies versus seeing what the enemy has. I mean, it could take you a month or however long, just depending on your own time frame, your free time, to play through a campaign. You're easily going to get your money's worth. So for me, I'm going to say, if you're already into DVG games, this one is one that you should take a look at. If you're already into DVG games and you love Mech Warrior, mechs, Valkyries, Jaegers, any big robots shooting and stomping and lasering shit, this is a no-brainer. This is one you should just jump right all over and just be done with it, because they obviously have room for expansion. I've already seen them doing things that I was thinking about mentioning to them to do, which was making bigger maps. They've already taken those steps. They've already got expansions lined up for European Valkyries, and I think it's Japanese Valkyries as well. So that's 4 sets of nations, or nation groups rather, that have their own individual feel with their Valkyries, their own types of units. Now, I think the units themselves, they're kind of going to bleed together. There are some minor differences, like the Abrams can shoot a little farther than the T-80, but it's not like a major difference. So I don't think you're going to get a huge difference in nation feel as far as these units are concerned. But these units, the Focus, the Valkyries, those for me have easily stood out between each other. I know some of you guys are wondering also, are there any negatives to the game itself? I can't comment as far as component quality because I don't have any finalized components, obviously, to gauge that on. The one thing that I can see maybe being an issue is the amount of smaller minis when it comes to the game itself. I would like to see maybe a touch more on that, but I know it comes down into a cost savings thing. It's like how many minis do we put in it, to give our players enough without having to spend so much on production. I know there's a back and forth as far as that's concerned. I maybe would have liked to see, like I said, just a touch more as far as the smaller units concerned. I think 4 Valkyries per side is perfectly fine. The expansions, this is on me. I haven't checked to see how much that they're running, but depending if they have a set, all the cards, all the Valkyries and units and stuff like that, and they're selling it in like the 40 to 50 range, I would be fine with that. So I need to take a look as far as that's concerned. But you do have the ability to buy extra minis if you do want them. And I do believe it should be coming with counters like this as well. So if you need stand-in counters for the campaign map itself, because that could be a place where you run out of minis to represent it, you will have counters to stand in. So, but anyway, yeah, that pretty much wraps us up as far as Valkyrie is concerned. I know they're on Kickstarter right now. Obviously, go take a look, see what you guys think. I know they've got a bunch of stretch goals. I think they got Garrison stretch goal on there and something else, some other minis or something like that can potentially be added, terrain, things of that nature. Like I said, if you're into DVG games, that's probably why you're watching this in the first place. If you're into DVG games and you like mechs, it's an easy case. If you're one of those that only likes historical games, give it a look. It is a new system, but it's a good system and it's not overly complex. There's not so much chrome under the hood that'll, burn you down. It's easy to pick up after you've played through a game or two. It really does start to flow. The only thing for me that I noticed that I screwed up on a fairly regular basis was keeping track of which dust trail should be behind which unit. And that's just something that's going to happen. That's nothing that you need to be like, ding against the game. That's just human nature. You're going to make those little types of mistakes. All right, but that's going to be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this series. I did have a lot of fun putting it on. And the one good part for me is I do have this in my stable now, so I'll be poking around with it every now and then as I wait for the real thing to come out. If you guys have any further questions, comments, concerns about the game, make sure you put them down below. DVG will be checking this out and they'll help answer them, as will I can. You guys take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.